some of the show. Uh, and among those people, and if I forget somebody, please forgive me. I did the best I could in remembering. John Pinkney, who handled our publicity. Chuck Azalina, who handled the setup of the auction, and he had a lot of help, especially from Daryl Hawk, but a lot of other people who were hauling stuff around and working hard yesterday and today to make the auction a success. Dave Sika, who is videotaping this, taking care of having the presentation, in fact, the whole convention on the internet, has been a tremendous help. And he also, along with John Kivlevin, have emptied the Sarnoff library and brought a bunch of stuff over here, which will be next year we'll have on display. And I think John was probably more responsible than Dave, from what Dave tells me, for making that a success. Don Saltzman, who's been our MC and our auctioneer, always brings a little humor to the otherwise dry subject of old televisions. Daryl Hawk, who is, as I mentioned, helped with the auction and helped set up and we're using his PC, and he took care of setting up the projector and all of that stuff here. Pete Dexness, who has been struggling with the new 15G that we're going to hear about, and has finally got it working, and I think is also going to be setting up some of our other color sets that have sort of gone out of adjustment over the year. Cliff Benham, who has gotten, I don't know if he dreams about wheels going around in his head or what, but he has succeeded in getting, every one of the wheel sets, the color wheel sets, had an issue, and they're all working now. Karen Saraki, who helped with registration. Bob, I never know, is it Galanter or Gallanter? Gallanter, that's what I thought. I heard somebody say Galanter earlier, and I thought I had it right. So anyway, Bob was responsible not only for a presentation today, but also for getting the sound system and the projector down from Chicago at the last minute. John Folsom, who is going to be collecting donations in a minute, important job. Ron Steinberg, who can't be here today, but has loaned us the sound system and the projector. Wayne Brettel, who I think has become our official photographer. Every year he sends me a CD full of pictures. Larry McIntyre, who you all know, does everything. And a special thanks to all the presenters and everybody who displayed stuff in the convention. We have some really wonderful stuff this year. So anyway, now I will turn it over to Don, who will be our MC and has a few other announcements. Thanks.
This is a very important part of the presentation. It's boring. I hate it. I hate the job. I work on the foundation of a major medical center, and my job, along with a dozen other guys, is to raise millions of dollars for the medical center, which is a blessing because we can do it. And I hate to ask people my checkbook is getting thinner and thinner because I'm a collector. You've all grown up in broadcasting, you've grown up in production, you know your electrons. Most of the world doesn't know the history and know what happened and how it was done. And I'll guarantee you that the young generation of today cannot read a book and figure it out. So what we're all doing for the next generations is we're leaving a heritage. You've all worked hard in your own way. You've contributed to the museum with TV sets and machinery and expertise. I have to tell you today that it costs Steve, who is the primary source of financing for the Early Television Foundation, more money to put on this convention than he takes in with the 25 bucks you give him. So, having said that, this is our second annual appeal at the convention to raise money to help Steve break even, let's say. And Steve told me just a few minutes ago that he has a $1,080 matching fund grant to the museum if we can raise money. And it's funny, $1,080 is 1080. There isn't a 1080 set in the building. I mean, I don't know what the hell he was talking about, but it's money. John Folsom, that you all know and love, because he's been breaking his back for years, and lately with Bob Gallanter, to get a 15G working, and part of their success that you'll hear about later is sitting there, and we just hope that Pete Dexness doesn't wreck everybody's problems and, you know, and the hardships they had to bring it here. There's a lot of thanks that has to be given, but the matching fund is very important, and John has agreed to be the caretaker, the collection agency, to take our donations of any amount, and I'm not going to tell you how much to give. We've all been generous in the past. I want you to be generous in the future. See John during lunch, during the break, over at the museum, write him a check, hand him a fistful of dollars. He'll take anything. He'll give you a receipt, and you will get a letter from the 501c3 saying thank you, and you'll get your tax deduction for next year. I can't tell you that how important it is. I'll start off, quite frankly, by giving $200 to your fund so that you can start. I will warn you, however, like myself, there are a bunch of last-minute Charlies in this audience. Larry and Steve know I'll come, so I never send them in the 25 bucks until I get here, or send it to him next week. It cost him more to feed us in lunch. Forget the dinner you got to pay for. Next year, the convention is going to cost more money. And Steve mentioned to me that if you're late, it's going to cost you more money than if you're early. So I was going to suggest, and I don't know what Steve's going to do, but if you get your reservations in by January or February of this coming year for the convention, he'll have a new set fee. If you want to come later, it's going to cost you more money. So give early, give generously, and John's going to walk around the room. He thinks he's in church today. He's going to have the collection plate, and be generous. It's for a cause you all love, or you wouldn't be here. And I respect the brain power that's in this room, because I'm no good with electrons. I'm a salesman. I'm no good with electrons. So having said that, we want to start the presentations. And I'm going to warn everybody that gives the presentation, we're not going to let you run over. Say what you want to say, teach us. We'll all listen respectfully, and then get out. I was asked by the president of the medical center to give a lecture at one of her presentations, and I said to her, Susan, you know me, I can't talk in under 2 hours. She says, you got 2 minutes and get the hell off the stage. You know, so we're not going to be that crude here, but we're going to talk first about the arrival of home videotape, 1956 to 76, which is a time period also right after or simultaneous with the introduction of broadcast videotape, but it allowed all of you at home to have those ancient dinosaurs that we all have a bunch of in the closet that we don't use anymore. Home videotape was important to Hollywood, to you. And Richard Deal, he worked in the Silicon Valley since 1980. I'm reading off my script here. He's specializing in video and specifically VTRs. He designed products for industrial broadcast markets. He built 2 Vidicon cameras from scratch before graduating from high school. Today he specializes in verifying video integrated circuits, I don't know what that means, and providing customer solutions to a Silicon Valley chip manufacturer and the webmaster of the website labguysworld.com. Richard, come on up. Come on, Richard. Don't be bashful. Where are you? Is he? Oh, there he comes. We thought you went to the casino.
I did.
Richard, according to my script, you have 45 minutes, and I already used up 2 of them.
Okay.
So welcome.
Thank you, Don.
Take care.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me, and thank you, Steve. How do you bring it up? Great.
We won't take it away from your time if you can figure out the computer.
I don't know this computer.
Who can help? Who can help? Daryl, where's the computer guy? Here he comes.
Is it on channel 3?
Little help. Why is that thing wrapped? Oh, well.
And then just use the arrow.
There we go. All right. World.com. I want to talk today about how we went from a giant videotape recorder full of tubes to a home VCR like a Betamax machine like that. It only took 20 years, and it's a remarkable story. I'm going to concentrate on only a little bit of it, and I'm going to assume that you all know how to record on tape. In 1950, Sarnoff asked his engineers for 3 gifts. He wanted an electronic refrigerator, a light amplifier, and a home videotape recorder. At the time, they were using fixed heads. The tape had to go 100 miles an hour. It didn't work. Using a stationary head like this, you have to run at least 100 inches per second to record a usable picture of less than 2 megahertz bandwidth. So the answer was to spin the heads. So they mounted heads to a wheel at Ampex and tried various configurations and numbers of heads until they came up with a system that gave them a writing speed of 1,000 inches per second, which could then record the entire 4 megahertz bandwidth of television. But that was a very complex system, required engineers to keep the machines running, a lot of high tolerance involved. So several people simultaneously came up with the idea of using a larger head and wrapping the tape around it at an angle. This gives you several advantages. It lowers mechanical tolerances and then produces a track pattern that records an entire frame of video. The 4-head method only recorded 16 lines at a time, which is a problem. You can't do any special effects or still frames. So on the screen right now is a picture of what the track pattern looks like. There was a picture. This is a pattern produced. The rotating head produces a slanted recording track that is an entire field of video. So you can stop the tape, let the head continue to spin, and get a still picture out of it. This is a typical tape path. It has an erase head leading into the scanning assembly, which can have any number of heads. It goes around past a fixed head, which is for both audio, and records pulses on the edge of the tape used to play back, to get the heads to line up on playback. There are many ways to configure the tape path. This is an example of a Sony machine that uses a scanner that is effectively a 1-head scanner with the tape wrapped virtually all the way around it. And what this gives you is you get 2 advantages. You get a high writing speed for a given diameter, and but you get a dropout where the head crosses between the tape paths. So Sony came up with the idea of adding a second head that's only a few degrees off. so that while the main head crosses over, that head records the sync portion, vertical sync of the video, and makes a continuous signal on playback. Here's an example of an early prototype machine made by Toshiba, 1957, and as you can see, the tape wraps entirely around the scanner. If you were to turn that up and look at it, it looks like an alpha. That's called an alpha wrap, and it has the crossover problem, but there are ways to fix it. For an early prototype, this is very impressive. Here's their second prototype, also one head, alpha wrap, but it is now working in '58. They've got repeatable results and getting pictures from it. At Ampex, they're working on it too. This is Alex Maxey, their mechanical engineer, working on the earliest prototype of their helical machine. And as you can see, it's all vacuum tubes in those days. Here's a picture of the entrance and exit guide, as it's called. And this is called an omega wrap. The tape comes to the head, bends almost 180 degrees, goes all the way around and bends out, making a very tiny gap, very hard to thread. And still, no matter how close you got it, you still got the dropout. The video was not continuous. This machine did make it to commercial production. I don't think they sold any. They were trying to market it into a mobile van of that era. It's an impressive picture, but if anyone can tell me if they sold one, I'd like to know. This was also the machine they took to the NTRB show in '54, or no, in '60, in case another competitor had a machine. This is Sony's answer to the problem. As you can see, the machines are starting to get smaller. This is a 1.5 head machine capable of black and white broadcast recording. Here's Ampex's answer to the problem. It's a 2-head machine. It's what's called a half alpha wrap, and has a very large scanner, had a very high writing speed. This is a prototype of Ampex's home machine, the VR 1500, which did go into commercial production and many were sold. I have one in my collection in mint condition that was donated to me by John Streets at Merlin Engineering. Many of you may know Merlinized VTRs in the broadcast business. And I worked for Merlin for a short while, had that opportunity. A fellow named Kurt McHine worked at Ampex for a short while, and when he left, he produced the first portable videotape recorder, meaning it had casket handles and 2 strong boys could move it around. And if you look closely, you can see that other than the tape width, it's the VR 1500. There was a huge patent battle, and Ampex lost. Meanwhile, Sony's not standing still. They've got a 1-inch machine. This is the EV200 1-inch, and it's got 4 megahertz bandwidth. It's right up there and working well. They're still thinking broadcast quality in those days. They're not thinking down to what a consumer would like to have. Sony produces a 1/2-inch machine. This is the first machine actually marketed for home use specifically, and they called their machines video corders. They also called their audio recorders tape corders. And this was a very successful series of machines. There are many in existence, and there's a great demand for tape transfer today. This is the single deck by itself, the CV2000. They produced it in industrial gray and in a nice furniture grade walnut case that you could have in your living room, and it didn't look too shabby. Many people put them on eBay and say they're so rare, they didn't make very many of these. Unfortunately, that production line at Sony in 1966 is going to a vanishing point. They made thousands of them a month. It was a very successful format. It used a method of recording called skip field, which is to record every other field of video and play it twice. It's a compromised system. I show this, we go back to the PV100 2-inch machine just for a moment, because there's a great picture that I wanted to show of the assembly line at Sony where they built those by the thousands. These were used industrially and personally. A lot of people had them in as personal video recorders, specifically Jerry Lewis. He claims to have a patent for simultaneous video recording in film, but that's now in question. But he built a big roll-around console with his machine, and they called it Jerry's Monster. And in the famous movie with the giant set that's multi-stories and stuff, he had monitors everywhere for that. Here's a picture of them assembling heads at Sony, 1966. They were, you can see the precision is starting to show up in this, and the Japanese are really pushing ahead. Panasonic's answer to the CV2000 is their NV8000 series. Now, as you can see, they're starting to take a form. They're all looking the same. This is a full field recording machine. It records 40 minutes. It ran at 12 inches per second, had a better picture than CV2000. So Sony comes back hard. They start advertising heavy. You may have seen the ads in Time magazine and Newsweek and others. They're pushing this for home recording. Notice the built-in monitor. If you took one of these Sony machines with its skip field technique, it had sync disruption because it has to repeat one field and do some funnies to make it line up right. Old tube TVs didn't like it. So they built the TV right into the set. A company called Shibiden was also right in there. They were building copycat machines. None of these machines interchange. In fact, sometimes the same two models don't interchange in these days. There's a lot of work to be done. JVC is in on the game. They've got their answer to the problem. They all run at different tape speeds. The examples you've seen I have in the collection, and I have them online for viewing. Come on. They tried to go color with the CV series and produced two models of the machines. The top machine is an American model that they built 12 units and were shown at a trade show in '67, and the fellow who owns this one was told to destroy them. He kept two. Thank goodness. At this point, there's a great demand to go portable with video. Here again, we see Ampex's broadcast answer. We have a 50-pound backpack, which is a full broadcast videotape recorder on this fellow's back. He's probably pretty sore still to this day. Here's Sony's answer. We've got a 24-pound system, including the camera. The little tape recorder, it's record-only, skip-field system. You play the tapes back on your CV2000s. Very beautiful machine. They got them in New York. On the first day he got them at the New York office, there was a fire across the street, and he made the news by walking out there and recording the fire engines coming up there. Panasonic I call the Me Too company. Whatever Sony did, Panasonic had one too. Little record-only machine. It didn't even have a rewind function. It had a little hand crank you put on the take-up reel to wind it back. 1969, we're moving right along. Akai comes out with a video format that's 1/4 inch, trying to make these systems smaller. But remarkably, their tape recorders weigh more than the 1/2 inch machines. Because they wanted to keep their camera cheap. They proceeded, they did evolve this series of machines. The first machine I showed you could only record from the camera. The Model 110 was able to record an external television signal, and they had an optional TV tuner you could buy for that. Or you could record from little studio cameras or what have you. And then the 120 added a fancier camera, which had an electronic viewfinder in the camera, and you could watch playback in the camera. So they're catching up in those functions. This format works reasonably well, but its low bandwidth has terrible pictures. Lots of them exist, and there are a lot of tapes that need copying out there. They also, Akai also had this format in 2 tabletop machines. The top machine with the 11-inch reels could record for 2 hours. The bottom machine was a fancy little rig for your audio file. It recorded on 7-inch reels and could record for, I believe, 1 hour and 20 minutes on the 7-inch reels of videotape threaded through one path. Or if you threaded around the audio heads, you had a great 4-track tape recorder. They did take this system all the way through to color, and they tried to sell it to broadcasters. One of the ads that I remember that I love so much shows the cameraman from your local TV station with his 8mm movie camera, and the slogan is, "Your viewers will never know the difference." Boy, is that the truth. It records colors, and that's all you can say. In 1969, MITI in Japan, the Ministry of Information and Technology, the industry, wanted them to standardize their machines. There was a great chaos in the industry, and it was hurting everybody. And the path to color required a standard. So the EIAJ Type 1 standard was developed, and immediately had a deck and a porta-pack. Panasonic came out right away with matching components. Me too, they're right there. JVC jumps in the bandwagon and is producing these. Nobody's making money. Nobody's making a dime on this stuff. They're pumping them out. They're being sucked up by schools, churches, industry. They're not selling many to consumers. Here comes Ampex. Ampex just could never think down to the consumer level. This is their answer in conjunction with Toshiba. The marriage was called Toamco. 2 prototypes were built. It's EIAJ standard. The first thing they did was put it on a self-threading reel, which was not standard, and split the audio track so they had stereo to give them a gimmick over the other guys. This thing bombed, needless to say. Their color is coming. 3 companies have presented to MIDI a color standard. Sony's so certain theirs will be accepted, they went into production of a color deck. This insulted the industry, the ministry, and they went with a different color process. And this model of deck, the AV5000, was obsoleted immediately. It will play black and white, not color standard. The standard color decks came out. They're starting to get really slick. They're working very well. Interchange is now reliable between decks and manufacturers. Panasonic has an equivalent machine. They have added limited editing functions. Panasonic comes out with the first portable that could do color. Requires an external adapter, which is the box sitting under the tape recorder, but it was capable of color. There was two versions of this model. Other than the case, I can't tell the difference. Sony's color came out. It's their black and white deck. They've added an inch to the bottom because there's another board added in, and a bunch of modules. They had 3 different modules: color record, color playback, RF unit. The machine would take any 2. It was never quite right. Very awkward. Self-threading reels. I don't know if they're trying to copy Ampex or not. JVC produced the last EIAJ color porta-pack, or last EIJ porta-pack period. Theirs was 100% full color machine, no modules, very slick. Again, they never made money. This machine actually led them directly to producing VHS. Not to leave the Soviet Union out of this, we were told they didn't have things, they were starving. They had home machines. They had home video recorder, and I suppose if you were high enough up in the hierarchy and signed all the papers, you could have one. I just had to show that. It was just too sexy to leave out. Backing up a few years, RCA realizes the answer's in cassettes. Consumers can't thread tape reliably. They produced a few hundred of these decks. They're called RCA mag tape. And they test marketed them in Indiana, not marketed, but tested them in homes, recalled them, and ground them up. This photo, that photo was sent to me recently by somebody, and they have one. So again, somebody with foresight grabbed one off the pile and saved it. This was a 4-head-based system with no threading mechanism. The cassette actually had a U-shaped opening and wrapped around the head when you put it in. It was already pre-threaded. In America, we're trying to produce this. A bunch of Ampex fellows and other people from the video industry formed a corporation called Cartridge Television to produce a home video recorder. They took every wrong idea there was and put them in this machine. It's a 3-head system. It's skip field recording. There are thousands of them out there. They manufactured 80,000 of these decks and sold very few. They're so big, they had to be built into a console TV. Also, when they were developing it, I have films of the engineers working on these things. They're sitting up on benches. All the controls are along the bottom edge. So after they put them in the TVs, you literally had to get on your hands and knees to operate it. This is my current CarterVision machine being test fired here. It was working that day, but the head was running just a skosh slow, so I put the black and white monitor on it and dialed in the horizontal hold to see the picture. Rewind didn't work, so I couldn't back the tape up after it ran through. And I have done nothing further with this stack. But I was pleased to see it. The entire circuit board spins. It's a beautiful machine. Sanyo came out with a cassette system that was pretty remarkable in itself, but was a dead end. It used the half-inch tape of the EIJ format, but a different scanner assembly with 4 heads. This is the first video cassette recorder that had true special effects, slow motion, perfect still frames. When Betamax came out, Matsushita, the parent company of both Panasonic and JVC, came out with this system called the VX format, or the Quasar Great Time Machine. A one-head system with a pre-threaded cassette. These things make great pictures and were very simple mechanically. Unfortunately, they were 5 minutes too late to the gate. That was one thing that stopped it. The other was that its cassette is the size of 4 Betamax cassettes. And we've reached critical mass. We have home VCRs at this point. All the pieces were there. Sony put it together into their Betamax machine, and which worked very well. We know that was successful. And when they went over to JVC, JVC turns out to have had a secret program that even their management didn't know about to develop VHS, and they showed it at different companies. They showed Betamax at different companies and just scared these guys to death, except at JVC. The engineers stood there blank-faced, and when their boss asked them what the problem was, they said it's 1 hour, and JVC had 2 hours. And that's predominantly what made VHS successful over Betamax. And that's the evolutionary path to home video machines. Thank you. Are there any questions? Never. Never. That was the first photograph, clear photograph I've seen. I've seen plenty of really bad pictures in magazines. Yes, sir.
I had always heard that the reason that the VHS made it was because Sony charged a whole lot of money to license the beta system, whereas VHS said to all the manufacturers, you can just use our system and don't charge any royalties.
That's not exactly right. Betamax, they were handing out Betamax to everybody. They wanted everybody to make Betamax. When they approached JVC, JVC was the only one who snubbed them because they had the VHS deck had just started working only days before that. They had it working.
So it was the 1 to 2 hour thing.
Yes. That was part of it. When Betamax was introduced in America, they marketed in both LA and Atlanta. JVC was a year behind them, but they marketed nationwide and made sure they had thousands and thousands of machines.
Nobody cared that beta was better.
It is better. The downside of the betterness is the high tensions inside the machine made them require more maintenance. A VHS deck almost never needs maintenance. They almost never break. I know a lot of them do, but not from the tape wearing the machine out. Yes?
I have heard that RCA approached JVC on two-speed, and the real breakthrough was that they asked them to slow the tape down and make it a two-speed machine, and that's what a 4-hour format was made. And that's
Right.
really
Right. RCA, in fact, did ask for the 2-hour speed in VHS, but VHS was entrenched by this point. The 2-hour speed, if they hadn't gone to the longer speeds, it still would have been a successful format. All half-hour formats fail. Every format that could not record a minimum of 1 hour was a failure right out of the gate.
I remember back in the early mid-'60s, around 63 to 65 era, a British company called Westgrove Electronics tried making a home VTR.
That's right.
And successfully sold a few of them in the UK. Have you ever encountered any of those machines?
Yes.
I remember my grandfather
Yes.
showing me literature.
That's right. These machines surfaced under 2 different brands. Telcan was one of them, and the other, what did you say?
Westgrove.
Westgrove was this one. I don't know how to bring it back up. The first picture I showed was the West Grove VKR 500. It used a fixed head. I have a wonderful picture somewhere I'll put on my website of somebody took when their machine hiccuped and filled the room with tape. And the pictures from those were horrible.
I remember my grandfather showing me pictures of a Huckleberry Hound cartoon with all sorts of horizontal streaking and tearing in the picture.
Yes, it took a remarkable TV to track these things. The tape speed control in those days is just grim. They're depending on the AC line frequency to give them speed control. It doesn't work. Yes.
Hugh Hefner had a room full of 1,500.
Yes, he did.
Anybody know whether he has tapes? It would be a magnificent collection of Chicago television, because he was doing dozens and dozens of tapes a week.
Yes. Yeah, he not only did he have a tape room in the mansion, he had a full-time engineer to run them and to record everything on TV for him while he was out of town. That's specifically what he had it for. But he was the first person in history to be charged with using copyrighted video material for business purposes when he had his 660 on his 707, the Black Bunny, and showing probably porno movies or regular movies to his friends and stuff when they'd have flying parties, which the courts decided were business meetings.
With the bunnies?
I don't know.
But do you know if he still has it?
He does have that. He does have all that stuff, but I don't know how to get access to it. I'm inquiring into that right now. Yeah.
On Cartervision, do you have a copy of The Lion in Winter? That was the only movie I ever saw released. It was in all the promotional literature for Carter.
They had a lot of movies. The parent company behind them was Avco Embassy. Avco had two things. Embassy was the film side of the business. They had a film archive. They were probably like the 4th or 5th place film company in the world. And Avco needed something to employ their technical people, because Avco is the company that made the proximity fuses for the weapons in World War II, and they had an idled assembly line. They needed something to build. So you can tell the Cartervision machines that were made on that line, they have olive drab scanners, because that's the paint they had, and those are the machines that won't interchange.
I have the manual on a Cartervision tape for Sears.
Yes, I have that. I have that posted on YouTube.
The tape?
I have that tape posted on YouTube, and it demonstrates the Cartervision system. It was a working system.
Transferred off, and if you
Yeah.
already
Oh, that cost me several $100 to get transferred by a fellow, the only person I know of that has a working Cartervision that's capable of playing well enough to copy. Yes, and he charged me an arm and a leg. Once he had the tapes, he had me, and the price kept. Yes. Yeah, I've left out the Europeans mainly because of time, but the European system, Philips produced a reel-to-reel system similar to EIJ. Very simplistic deck internally, mechanically. The technology is brilliant, worked very well, and then they produced a cassette format called VCR format, which causes a lot of confusion. Yeah? Talk to me afterwards. Yes?
Briefly, you mentioned the partnering of Toshiba and Ampex to produce this programmable product. Are you aware of the half-inch EIJ machine they made in quite a bit of quantity after that PR?
Yes, I am aware of that machine, and I have one in my collection. I also have the Toshiba branded identical machine, except it doesn't have the stereo heads. Yes.
Back in the early 50s, Lou Fosby formed a company to develop a video tape recorder. Do you know anything about that system? If it was good?
Yes, that was that system was multi-track. It was the fixed head method, and it used multiple tracks. And the way his system worked, it worked well because it was color. It had 3 video tracks and 2 audio tracks and a sync track on 1-inch tape, and the tape speeds were 120, 240, and 360 inches per second, and the reels were huge. RCA followed the same path. There's great pictures of Sarnoff standing there holding tape next to the prototypes. They all came to the same conclusions. This was not a viable method. In Britain, they had their first broadcast machine called Vera, Vision Electronic Recording Apparatus, was put on the air. It made good pictures, but it was ginormous. Its reels were even bigger. I'm not sure if they were 24-inch or what.
Do you know anything about the RCA holotape player?
No, I don't. I didn't pay much attention to it.
You ran across the GE format, reel, half-inch with the old Southern Standard?
Yes, I'm fully aware of those. Those were CV2000s, and I think they were, it was a deal between Sony and GE to get around antitrust or something. But GE did market a lot of those machines too, and they are strictly Sony CV2000s. I have all the documentation for those.
Did you ever encounter the CBS alternative to all of this?
EVR. Electronic video recording by our favorite mad scientist, Rube Goldberg. No, Peter Goldmark. Peter Goldmark, the inventor of the long play record. He developed a play-only system that was intended for the home that never caught on because it couldn't record, despite its name, electronic video recording. What the name implied was that the film, it used film, it contained a flying spot scanner method of scanning the film, like some telecines, and let's see, they were successfully sold to schools in Japan, and almost all of the material over there is sex ed films. I'm on the lookout for one of those films because based on the era, they have to be really good. One last question. The thing was beautiful. It looked like a modern VHS, VCR. They had every aspect of it right. Their studies were dead on, and it was even published information. I'm surprised these other developers didn't pick up on it, at least make their machines functionally like that, with the built-in receiver so you could record one show and watch another, and so on, all of your standard features. No, it was too expensive to manufacture in the United States at the time. And remember, RCA is a red, white, and blue American company, and they would never have dreamed of shipping their labor overseas. So, thank you.
Great, great. Do you know about this electronic stuff?
No.
Okay. That was very interesting. I think we all learned, and as just one little anecdote, one of the companies I was consulting for around that time was an advertising agency. And somebody approached them with a super secret video recording box. And they gave it to me to figure it out and see if they wanted to invest money. And in my limited knowledge, the guy brought in a standard reel-to-reel tape recorder with the regular reels you all remember. And he says, I get good pictures on this. I said, how? That is secret. I cannot tell you. I said, but if my guys invest, are you going to tell them? No. Okay. The machine's sitting on the table. I picked up the cover of the heads, and it was just looking like a tape recorder. But what I did see is that they were finely polished recording and playback heads, and you could not see the gap. And I decided, and I stumbled upon it, I said, what did you put in there to keep the gap close so that you get more resolution? I can't tell you, it's super secret. I said, well, turn on the bloody thing, let me see this. Well, it was like fog. It was like seeing moving pictures in fog, and of course I sent them packing and nothing happened, but there were a lot of amateurish attempts to get into the VTR group. Now that we've got a few minutes before the next one, you all saw in the museum, or before I start this, John, how are collections coming? Come on, you're kidding me. Your box is empty? Yeah, will everybody encourage John to walk around and collect a few bucks from each table. We don't care if you pool your money or give it separately, and it's embarrassing time. Everybody has to give a certain amount. Oh, here he comes, John. Here he comes. And we're not going to have to bond John for the collection. We trust him. Cliff, where are you, Cliff? Come on up. Cliff has been messing around with color wheels since he read about them in a 1953 book when there was still experimental broadcasts coming out of CBS in New York in the middle of the night, and I don't think it was 405 line or some strange thing. And he got a color tail converter. He made it work, which had to use, I guess, the early technology. And after college, he worked for educational and commercial broadcasting, becoming chief engineer of the QVC shopping network. Did you get a lot of stuff wholesale from them? Never. Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry about that. and he finished up his career at Comcast Cable. And I just want to, I don't work for Comcast, but somebody in the room does, unfortunately. They've turned off just about digital. The MSOs in Connecticut are turning off analog. They'll be all digital by the end of the year. So you're going to have a ton of TV sets that you're going to need converters for. Darryl, you're going to be in business providing little bitty converters for these analog millions of sets that we have. And it's going to be an amazing thing. I'll give you a hint. A friend of mine is an engineer for the local cable company. And as they're getting into digital, they're taking all their analog modulators out of service, and he's going to throw them away. I said, no, don't do that. Bring them to my place, and let's set up some mini transmitting stations out of the RF of the modulators with a little set of rabbit ears for receiving. And somebody told me, because I don't have the capability, that you can get across the room, you can get to your house from the barn, you can get, you know, some movement, and if you put some amplifiers on there for antennas, you get a little more. Now that may be illegal, and I'm not telling you to do it, but it can be done. And look to your local cable companies who are going to be tossing these analog converters. And I've got my hands on a few, hopefully this summer, as they turn off the analog system. Dave, is that a true story? That you can get some analog converters if you know people at the cable companies?
If they don't sell them on eBay. They're going to show up on eBay.
All right, so spend 10 bucks. Yeah, analog on cable. The cable coming out of your wall, out of your wire, that you plug in the back of the set, won't work after a period of time as they recapture spectrum to put more digital on with compression and high definition and all the other wonderful things like telephones on your cable system and Wi-Fi and God knows what else they're going to bring down the pike. But it's happening. So Cliff has done a lot of stuff in the museum with the color wheels. Come on and tell us about how you reclaim this old technology.
Started here. And then just arrow. Okay. Well, that is a color wheel that was in the RX-40 at ETF. I built that a year or so ago because the one that was in there wasn't balanced or wasn't working just right. And that's the first attempt at building a color wheel myself. I've never built one completely myself, starting with clear plastic discs. And the things that made it work was a thing from Staples called glue tape. And you just attach the glue tape, it rolls on with like a roller. And you roll it onto the disc, and then you can stick the filters that you've cut out. In my case, I cut them out with a piece of cardboard, which was my pattern. and I stuck the filters on the disc and balanced it a little and sent it over, and it was working on the set until I figured out these new colors. What this has to do with is that the original CBS color wheels in the CBS studio sets and the commercial sets were all made containing Ratten filters. Now, a Ratten filter is a very high quality photographic filter, and they are made by Eastman Kodak. Today, they're still made by Eastman Kodak, but they don't make nearly so many as they used to. And they are no longer sold by Eastman Kodak, but they're sold by Tiffin. Tiffin is the marketing agent for them. Well, they're very precise filters, and they are what CBS used to build the color wheels. The problem with trying to replace those original filters, which are now 60 years old, is that the original filters have faded. So you can't, in most instances, take an original filter and compare it to something new and find an easy replacement for it, because you can't make a comparison because it's faded. The Ratten filters are very, very expensive. I have a bag of all the different filters here. I've got Ratten filters. I've got about 16 of them. Each little 3-inch by 3-inch filter cost me about 40 bucks. So they're very, very expensive. And if you were to try to buy Ratten filter material to build a wheel for, say, the Gray research monitor, excuse me, you would be spending 2,300 bucks for 6 pieces of filter material. And this is, I just brought this to show you. There's some red. Hold it over here in the light. You can get some idea of. If I was holding up Ratten filters, this would be about $2,300 worth. So that's enough to make one red segment. So you got to have 2 pieces of the red, one piece of red for each of the 2 segments. So I thought, and I wondered, how can I come up with replacement filters for these nice original Ratten filters? Well, the only thing that's out there is theatrical lighting gel. Now, early on, theatrical lighting gel was just that. It was gelatin with some sort of organic dye in it. And if you put the lighting gel to its proper use in a theatrical light, after about 3 hours, it would be all faded. But today, lighting gel is made with, a lot of it is made by, with polycarbonate, and it is extruded. The filter material is between 2 sheets of polycarbonate clear, and the result is a very stable, unscratchable color filter. And so these things are available. A sheet of 20-inch by 24 filter material is about $7. So these are all of the 11 manufacturers' sample swatch books that I went through trying to find candidate red, green, and blue filters to replace the original Rattens with. Now, this is very difficult to do because at the time I started this 3 or 4 years ago, I had no way to measure filters. I had no way to compare them except to put them on the front of a CRT and see if they looked the same. Well, after that, I got a thing called a colorimeter, which is a Spider 3. The Spider 3 is a nice little instrument. It's not terribly accurate, but it's better than no instrument. So I was able to compare the Ratten filters on the front of a CRT to the various filters from all the manufacturers and have pages and pages of X, Y coordinates, which is how you tell what the color of a filter is. And just as important as the XY coordinates is also the transmission characteristic of the filter. The transmission of the filter is how much light gets through the filter from the original source. And in CBS color, you generally end up with about 10 or 11% of the original light. So if you have 150-foot Lambert CRT, you're going to end up with a brightness of about 15-foot Lamberts. Okay. That's just some bullet points for what I'm talking about. The next step was to try to get a better reading of what the colors were. So I found a way to send away my Spider 3 and get it calibrated, and it came back with a program, and I put it on my PC, and it now was much more accurate than it was when I first got it a year or so ago. So then I went back and remeasured every single filter. I've measured about 200 or 300 blues, about 90 greens, and about 60 reds. And the blues was very surprising to me that there were so many different blues and so many that were very close, but just enough different that they warranted measuring and testing. So what I ended up with was a new list of filters, and from that I began working on a filter wheel which would have two characteristics. Number one, when you spin the wheel in front of a black and white CRT, it won't change the color of the light coming through the CRT. So if the color temperature of, say, a 10FP4, which is what the Gray Research Monitor and the CBS RX40 in the museum use, the color temperature is about 6,900 to 7,000 degrees Kelvin. So my goal was to come up with a filter wheel that didn't change the color temperature. So if you put a grayscale on the screen and looked through the filter at it as it was spinning, it would look black and white. Because the only way you can reproduce a very good color picture is to be able to make a good black and white one to begin with. So I began experimenting, and I found that it took, to build the wheel that's in the Gray Research Monitor, it took a GAM 245 red filter. It took a blue Roscoe E195 European color blue filter, and it took 2 layers of a format number 122 filter, which is made in England. And it took me 8 weeks to get the filters from England. I guess the boat was slow. At any rate, I put them together, spun the wheel, the test wheel, in front of a 10FP4, and I couldn't believe my eyes. It was black and white. So I checked everything, went back and remeasured everything. I couldn't believe I had just hit it. But I got to say, I didn't just hit it, because this is after 2 years of testing filters, and I finally arrived at this decision to use the GAM, the Roscoe, and the format filters. So that's the short story of how I got there. The other things that you need to know about how this works is that there is a sliding scale. The sliding scale is the brightness of the picture versus the saturation of the color. If you have really dark color filters, the picture is going to look very saturated, and you're going to have very brilliant colors, but the overall picture brightness is going to be very low, 2 to 3 foot Lamberts. So if you get back up into a slightly more median range, you will end up with a color picture that is fairly well saturated, but it'll be a lot brighter. So that was what I was aiming for, was somewhere in the median range to get the desired effect and be able to produce a reasonably bright picture, but with very, very good color. So that's the description of what is in the Gray Research Monitor now, is a wheel that I built. Let's see, what do we have next? This is the selection of the red filters. The Rattan number 26 is the red triangle. All the other filters are sort of around it and between it, and this is the white of the CRT. So if you kind of